Georgia will officially become the first state to allow pharmacies to sell and distribute medical marijuana to their population. An interesting development for a southern state that has very tight regulations on medical cannabis. Also, a lot of questions arise. Where are they going to get their inventory? Is this interstate? Are more people going to do this? Are more states going to adopt this? How does this conflict with small local dispensaries? There's a lot of details to go through. So let's check out what's going on down in the Peach State of Georgia. Georgia will soon become the first state in the nation to offer medical marijuana products at independent pharmacies, said the state officials. The Georgia Board of Pharmacy began accepting applications this week, and nearly 120 pharmacies have agreed to provide medication from Botanical Sciences, one of the state's 2 licensed production companies. It will likely take a few weeks before medical marijuana is available in the pharmacies. After they submit applications, inspections will be required before the board grants approval. Now, it's interesting that it says they've agreed to distribute products from Botanical Sciences, one of state's 2 licensed production companies, meaning in the entire state of Georgia, only 2 production companies are legalized and licensed to sell and distribute medical marijuana. Now, that's not a monopoly because there's more than one option, but it's pretty close to a monopoly. You have 2 options, A or B. Just like politics, you have 2 options, left or right, Democrats or Republicans. There is not a monopoly, it's a duopoly. This is very similar. And you have to ask, I wonder how much money it took to get to be one of those 2 licensed production companies. Who knows? Medical marijuana is only available to Georgians with approval from a physician to treat severe illnesses including seizures, terminal cancers, Parkinson's disease, and PTSD. Low THC oil can contain no more than 5% THC, the compound that gives users a high. Now, this is a little unfair because pills such as morphine or hydrocodone or Vicodin and very strong pills are way stronger than just 5% THC oil. So why the cap on THC limits, but not the cap on pill limits? I would like that to stay a little bit more consistent. The expansion of medical cannabis sales into drugstores will put low THC oil within reach of many more patients, adding to the state's 7 dispensaries that have opened in April. Meaning there's only 7 dispensaries that are currently licensed in the entire state of Georgia. And if you're not lucky enough to live next to one of them, you're kind of SOL. Patients will be able to buy cannabis oil at pharmacies if they show a state-issued low THC oil registry card and identification. Now, this kind of goes to my point where I say I don't really like having to register. Now, I guess it's still kind of like registering with a pharmacist of your pills that you get, and that's fine as long as it's protected by OSHA and it's protected by, the patient confidentiality. But you're starting to see people say, well, you're not allowed to own a gun if you're a medical cannabis user. Well, how would they verify that? Just like this, they would look at state registries and say, well, yep, he's on the registry of oil. You cannot use him he's not allowed to buy a gun. That's what I don't like, although the NRA is fighting that, and we'll see how that happens. Quote, pharmacists have been fielding questions from patients for years without ever having the ability to do anything about it, which is extremely true, said the CEO for Botanical Sciences, Gary Long. Finally, they have the ability not just to give people advice, but provide them with the therapies they've been seeking. About 90% of Georgia's population will be within a 30-minute drive of a pharmacy selling medical marijuana once they open, according to Botanical Sciences. So they're going to go from 7 to who knows how many, and everything will be within a 30-minute drive, which is great. Pharmacists are a trusted provider, and it's a way for us to destigmatize this new medicine. It will make people more comfortable if they want to come in and ask questions about it. And that's what we said in the nurses episode that you can check on the channel, where nurses and pharmacists are essentially the front line of information and destigmatization for the cannabis industry at large, for the broader population. The Georgia General Assembly approved distribution of low THC oil as part of a state law passed in 2019. but it's taken years to create regulations for safety, inspections, licensing, and distribution. Governor Brian Kemp approved the rules last month that were passed by the Georgia Board of Pharmacy, clearing the way for pharmacy sales to begin. The Georgia Department of Public Health recently disclosed it had miscounted and inflated the number of registered medical marijuana patients. Just 14,000 active patients and caregivers are currently signed up, far fewer than the 50,000 previously reported. This is interesting because as much as we like to promote the pluses and positives and pros of cannabis legalization, it's still business as usual when it comes to industry practices such as inflating numbers for tax purposes or inflating numbers to make it seem like there's a higher demand than there really is, because if you don't, the evolution and the progress isn't going to really happen no matter what. Now, I don't agree with lying, but it seems like this tactic might have worked if it was intentional. Might have been an error, but that's a big error. I don't know how you organically error from 50,000 to 14,000. But I've never been good at math, so that might be possible. Quote, "We're going to have patients that need this health care in some remote parts of Georgia that probably would never have had a dispensary near them. But they do have a caring professional, a knowledgeable professional pharmacist in their communities who can talk to them," said the owner of several pharmacies in the Atlanta area, Jonathan Marquise, vice president for the Georgia Pharmacy Association. So that's interesting. He is the vice president for the Georgia Pharmacy Association. He owns several pharmacies. Seems like a little insider knowledge there, but what do I know? There are over 400 independent pharmacies in Georgia, and Marquise said he expects most of them will be interested in selling low THC oil. The product isn't being sold by national drugstores like CVS and Walgreens. So that's great that these are more focused on independent pharmacies as opposed to interstate, chain, or international pharmacies. So that kind of answers our question earlier that they're more independent pharmacies instead of chains. Andrew Turnage, executive director for the Georgia Access to Medical Cannabis Commission, said the pharmacy rule is definitely big news. I would agree. It's not all 100% great, but it's also not all 100% bad. Just like any development in any industry, but especially the cannabis industry, you have to take what they give you and try to iron out the procedures as best you can with what they give you. It helps both our licensees and especially our patients. It will put access in virtually every county of the state. And this is awesome. Georgia has a lot of veterans down there who have PTSD that could use this low THC oil. And it is a great way to introduce a southern state to the benefits of cannabis, whether it be medical or recreational. But it is a medicine and it can be used to treat all of these diseases. So I'm glad that they're really taking a landmark step because no other states do that. You would think maybe Colorado or Michigan or Wisconsin or Minnesota or California, Oregon, these states that have already been legal for many years now, that you figure they might have done this before these people do. So it's interesting that Georgia did this first. But shout out to Georgia for being the first to allow pharmacies to distribute medical oil. Now, I hope this doesn't block independently owned dispensaries from opening up in these locations as well. That'll be interesting to keep an eye on, where they say, well, we already have a pharmacy here, so we can't open a dispensary. That would be bad for local business, and it would be bad for small and independent entrepreneurs that want to be in the cannabis and hemp world. But no need to stress about it before it happens. All we do here is celebrate the good news about cannabis and warn you about some of the other things. And this right now is a great development. And as they say, it's, quote, definitely big news, especially for Georgia. So shout out to the Georgia Peaches. And it looks like I'm going to go visit my friends down in Atlanta very soon. Stay blessed.